Yo, book nerds, I finished reading Seen and Unseen What Dorothea Lange, Toyo Miyatake, and Ansel Adams' photographs reveal about the Japanese-American incarceration, which was written by Elizabeth Partridge and illustrated by Lauren Tamaki. I don't really know what to classify this book as. Maybe I would classify it as a picture book for adults, but it's over 100 pages. But it's got photographs and illustrations in here, but an insane amount of good content. This is a nonfiction, and wow, was it eye-opening. I knew that the US had put Japanese Americans and Japanese immigrants in camps during World War II. I knew that, but I didn't know what those camps were like. I didn't know how long they were there, and I definitely didn't know what their conditions were like. So this was extremely eye-opening. It was just so crazy to learn about. Like, we have this hush-hush narrative in the US about this. Like, we act like it doesn't exist. And they actually touch on that in here. Like, people would rather just like forget about it and move on, but we shouldn't forget about it. We need to acknowledge this pain and we need to make it right. It was just crazy to learn things like when the Japanese were imprisoned, many of them had to work for the war effort for very little pay. And then think about it, if you're working for a war effort and if you have family yet back in Japan, like, you're kind of fighting against your own family, and that's just like an awful position to be in. And the US government also gave a loyalty test to these Japanese people that never did anything to say they weren't loyal to the US. Like, it's awful. And if you didn't answer questions correctly, you were considered disloyal and may end up in a worse camp than the one you were at. A newborn baby was marked disloyal to the US because the baby's parents were considered disloyal. Like, how can a baby be disloyal? It's just insane that this is real history. Like, I'm ashamed to say that. And these poor people, they were just uprooted from their lives. They lost like all of their possessions. They lost their houses, their businesses, everything. And they only had what they could carry, and it's so sad. And then afterwards they get released and the government just kind of left them like, yeah, whatever, you got, here's $25 and a bus ticket. Like, what the hell? It is so messed up. And like, I'm so glad that I read this because I always want to learn, and I wish this were taught in schools. Like, I wish more people understood this history and that this really happened. And oh my gosh, there's so many parallels between the fear of Japanese back then, that irrational fear back then, and then in recent history with COVID-19 and the irrational fear of Chinese Americans and other Asian Americans right now. Like it's still happening. Yeah, they're not being rounded up and put in camps, but like, this irrational fear and prejudice still goes on. And come on, we're better. We should be better by now than that. This was a tragedy. It should never have happened. Whole families were living in tiny little rooms. Like, some were living in horse stalls. Like, manure and urine residue. Like, oh, yuck. It's disgusting. It is so wrong. And I think more people need to pick this up and educate themselves on what our actual history is so that we can make this right. If you've read this, let me know what your thoughts were on it. It definitely was an eye-opening experience for me. So check this out if you haven't. That's all for me this week. Kind of a shorter video, I know, but I will see you guys next Monday. Hit like and subscribe. Thanks for talking books with me.